Hello, my video today is day 205 of the plan, and so today I'll be reading by Matthew chapters 13 through 16. Put my sunglasses. Okay. Chapter 13, Parable of the Sower. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, while the whole crowd stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, "Consider the sower who went out to sow. As he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came along to devour them. Other seed fell on the rocky ground where it didn't have much soil, and it grew up quickly, since the soil isn't deep. But when the sun came up, it scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns came up and choked it. Still other seed fell on the good ground and produced fruit, some 100, some 60, and some 30 times what was sown. Let anyone who has ears listen." Why Jesus used parables. Then the disciples came up and asked him, "Why are you speaking to them in parables?" He answered, "Because the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given for you to know, but it has not been given to them. For whoever has more will be given to him, and he will have more than enough. Whoever does not have, even what he has taken away from him. That is why I speak to them in parables, because looking they do not see, and hearing they do not listen or understand. Isaiah's prophecy is fulfilled in them, which says, you'll listen and listen, but never understand. You'll look and look, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown callous. Their ears are hard of hearing. They have shut their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts and turn back. I would heal them. Blessed are your eyes because they do see, and your ears because they do hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see the things you see but didn't see them, to hear the things you hear but didn't hear them." The parable of the sower explained. So listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and doesn't understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in his heart. This is the one sown along the path. No one else sown on rocky ground. This one who hears the word immediately receives it with joy, but he has no root, and it's short-lived. When distress or persecution comes because of the word, immediately falls away. Now the one who's sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but worries about this age and deceitfulness. The wealth choke up the word, and it becomes unfruitful. The one sown on the good ground, this is the one who hears and understands the word, who does produce fruit and yields, some 100, some 60, some 30 times what's sown. Parable of the wheat and the weeds. He presented another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while people are sleeping, his enemy came, sowed weeds among the wheat, and left. When the plants sprouted and produced grain, then the weeds also appeared. The landowner's servants came and said to him, "Master, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where do the weeds come from?" And an enemy did this, he told them. "So do you want us to go and pull them up?" The servants asked him. "No," he said. When you pull up the weeds, you might also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At harvest time, I'll tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and tie them in bundles to burn them. But collect the wheat in my barn." The parable of the mustard seed and the leaven. He presents another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man took from sowed in his field. It is the smallest of the seeds, but when it grows, it's taller than the garden plants and becomes to a tree, so the birds of the sky come and nest in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven. A woman took and mixed into 50 pounds of flour until all of it was leavened. Using parables fulfills prophecy. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables, and he did not tell them anything without a parable, so that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Open my mouth in parables, I'll clear things kept secret from the foundation of the world." Jesus interprets the parable of the wheat and the weeds. Then he left the crowds and went to the house. His disciples approached him and said, "Explain to us what the parable of the weeds in the field." He replied, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Its field is the world, and good seed. These are the children of the kingdom, the weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest at the end of the age and harvesters are angels. Therefore, just as the weeds are gathered and burned in fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather from his kingdom who caused sin, and those guilty of lawlessness. They'll throw them into a blazing furnace where they'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like a sun in their Father's kingdom. Let anyone who has ears listen. Parable of the hidden treasure, the priceless pearl. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure buried in a field, that a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like the merchant in search of fine pearls. When he found one priceless pearl, he went and sold everything he had and bought it. Parable of the net. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a large net thrown into the sea. It collected every kind of fish, and when it was full, it dragged ashore and sat down and gathered the good fish into containers, but threw out the worthless ones. So to be at the end of the age, the angels will go out, separate the evil people from the righteous, and throw them into a blazing furnace where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Storehouse for the truth. Have you understood all these things? They answered him, yes. Therefore he said to them, every teacher of the law who's become disciple of the kingdom of heaven will be like the owner of a house who brings out his storeroom treasures, new and old. Rejection at Nazareth. When Jesus had finished these parables, he left there. He went to his hometown and began to teach them in their synagogue, so that they were astonished and said, where does man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother called Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And his sisters, aren't they all with us? So where does he get these things? And they were offended by him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except for his hometown and his household. And they not do many miracles because of their unbelief. Chapter 14. John the Baptist beheaded. At the time Herod Tetrarch heard the report about Jesus. This is John the Baptist, told servants. He has been raised from the dead, and that's why miraculous powers are working in him. For Herod had arrested John, chained him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, since John had been telling him, it's not lawful for you to have her. Though Herod wanted to kill John, he feared the crowd, since they regard John as a prophet. Herod's birthday celebration came. Herodias' daughter answered for him and pleased Herod, so he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she answered, give me John the Baptist's head here on a platter. Although the king regretted it, he commanded that it granted because of his oaths and his guest. So he sent orders and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought into a platter and given to the girl who carried it to her mother. The disciples came, removed the corpse, buried it, and went and reported to Jesus. Feeding the 5,000. When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there to boats from a remote place alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot and towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, had compassion on them, and healed their sick. When evening came, the disciples approached him and said, this place is deserted, so that they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves. They don't need to go away, Jesus told them. You can get something to eat. We only have 5 loaves and 2 fish here, they said. Bring them here to me, he said. Then he commanded the crowd to sit down on the grass. He took up the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up 12 baskets full of leftover pieces. Now those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children, walking on the water. Immediately he made the disciples get up into the boat and go ahead of them to the other side. While he dismissed the crowds, after dismissing the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. Well into the night he was alone. Meanwhile the boat was already some distance from land, battering by the waves. Because the wind was against them, Jesus came toward them walking on the sea very early in the morning. When the disciples saw him on the sea, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. Immediately Jesus spoke to them. Have courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter answered him, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come. And climbing out the boat, Peter started walking in the water and came towards Jesus. When he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught hold of him. And he said to him, you have little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and then those in the boat worshipped him and said, truly you are the Son of God. Miraculous healings. When they had crossed over, they came to the shore of Gennesaret. When the men that place recognized him, and they alerted the whole vicinity, brought them all out who were sick. They begged him that they might only touch the end of his robe, as many as touched it were healed. Chapter 15. The tradition of the elders. Then Jesus was approached by Pharisees and scribes from Jerusalem, who asked, "Why do your disciples break the traditions of elders? For they don't wash their hands when they eat." He answered them, "Why do you break God's commandment because of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and your mother.' Whoever speaks evil of father or mother must be put to death. We say, whoever tells his father or mother, 'Whatever benefit you might have received from me is a gift committed to the temple,' he does not have honor to his father. In this way you have defied the word of God because of your tradition. Hypocrites, Isaiah prophesied correctly about you when he said this. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. They worship me in vain, teaching as doctrine human commands. Defilement is from within." Summoning the crowd, he told them, "Listen and understand. It's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person." The disciples came up and told him, "Do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard what you said?" He replied, "Every plant that my heavenly Father didn't plant will be uprooted. Leave them alone. They are blind guides, and if blind guide the blind, both will fall into a pit." Then Peter said, "Explain this parable to us." Do you still lack understanding?" he asked. "Don't you realize that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is eliminated? What comes out of the mouth comes from the heart. This defiles a person. For from the heart comes evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, thefts, false testimonies, slander. These are the things that defiles a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile a person." A Gentile mother's faith. When Jesus left there, he withdrew to the area of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman came out from the region and kept crying out, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely tormented by a demon." Jesus did not say a word to her. His disciples approached him and urged him to send her away because she's crying out after us. He replied, "I was sent only to the lost sheep out of the house of Israel." But she came, knelt before him, and said, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." "Yes, Lord," she said. "Yes," she said, "Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus replied to her, "Woman, your faith is great. It will be done for you as you want." And from that moment her daughter was healed. Healing many people. Moving on from there, Jesus passed along from the Sea of Galilee. He went up on a mountain and sat there. Large crowds came to him, including the lame and blind and crippled, those unable to speak, and many others. They put at his feet and healed them. So the crowd was amazed when they saw those unable to speak talking, the crippled restored, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they gave glory to the God of Israel. Feeding the 4,000. Jesus called his disciples again. "I have compassion toward this crowd because they have already stayed with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry, otherwise they might collapse on the way." The disciples said to him, "Where could we get enough bread to sustain to feed such a crowd?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked them. 7, they said, "and a few small fish." After commanding the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they collected the leftover pieces, 7 large baskets full. Now there are 4,000 men who had eaten, besides women and children. After dismissing the crowds, he got into the boat and went into the region of Magadan. Chapter 16. The leaven of the Pharisees and the Pharisees and Sadducees approached and tested him, asking to show them a sign from heaven. He replied, "When the evening comes, you say, 'It'll be good weather because the sky is red.' And in the morning, 'Today it will be stormy because the sky is red and threatening.' You know how to read the appearance of the sky, but you can't read the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation demands a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah." Then he left them and went away. The disciples reached the other shore, and they had forgotten to take bread. Jesus told them, "Watch out and beware of the leaven, the Pharisees and the Sadducees." Then they were discussing among themselves, "They didn't bring any bread." Aware of this, Jesus said, "You have little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves that you don't have bread? Don't you understand yet? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for 5,000, how many baskets you collected, or the 7 loaves for 4,000, how many large baskets you collected? Why is it you don't understand that when I told you, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, it wasn't about the bread?" Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven and bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Peter's confession of the Messiah. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, Who Who do people say that Son of Man is? They replied, Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But you, he told them, who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, You're Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus responded, Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because your flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. I also say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he gave his disciples orders to tell no one that he was the Messiah. His death and resurrection predicted. From then on, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed and raised on the third day. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Oh no, Lord, this will never happen to you. Jesus turned to Peter, Go behind me, Satan. You are hindrance to me because you are not thinking about God's concerns but human concerns. Take up your cross. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If anyone wants to follow me, after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me will find it. For what will benefit someone if he gains the whole world yet loses his life? Or will anyone give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in glory of his Father, and they'll reward each according to what he has done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. That's all the reading for today. And in case you're wondering, Matthew is 28 chapters, and I'm on I made it to chapter 16. I've read all chapter 16 today, and so 12 more chapters, and then it'll be done with Matthew and start Mark. But anyways, that's all for today. So let me just show you the view real quick. It's pretty beautiful. So if you've had a great day so far, have a great day. Remember, God loves you, and goodbye.